Welcome to Rebel Nurse, the podcast that's here to show you what is possible with your nursing degree. I'm your host, Erica Browning, a proud nurse and your guide to exploring all the unique and exciting opportunities this profession has to offer. Let's get into today's conversation. Hi, Janessa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Erica.
Yes, let me just do a little introduction and then we'll just jump right into it. Everyone, this is Janessa Dean. She is now, I didn't know this, she's a retired nurse. She retired 2 years ago, and she is now a full-time flight nurse coach. Did I say all that right? Flight nurse coach.
Yes, you said it correct.
Which would lead us to believe that you have some flight nursing experience.
Yes, I do.
So cool. So let's just get started. Janessa, I told you in the beginning I was going to ask where you are. What state are you located in?
I am located in California. I'm right in the middle, Central Valley. I've lived here my whole life, pretty familiar with California and everything in it. Yeah.
I'm in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. My sister lives up near Santa Rosa.
Okay.
I'm sure she'd love me to tell everyone, but whatever. Okay, great. So where did you go to nursing school?
So I went to nursing school here in the Valley. I actually grew up in Central California. Never thought we would end up staying here, but my husband's from here too. Both our families are. Started to have kids. Nursing's kind of my second career. It wasn't my first career. I got my degree in communications, broadcast journalism, and thought I wanted to go into that. Ended up not doing that. Went into banking for 5 years, had a couple kids along the way, and then just realized nursing was what I wanted to do. Actually, I had my twins, and they were in the NICU. They were 3.5 months early. And when I was experiencing the NICU, I knew I wanted to do critical care. And so that's really what fired me up to do nursing. And that's how I got into my second career of nursing.
I'm the same. So, well, no, I didn't have twins and they were not in the NICU. But nursing is a second degree for me. I went back to nursing school. I did a second degree program. I think I was in my early 30s. Was yours a second degree program?
No, I wish I would have done that because I could have done an accelerated bachelor's. But no, I did it all over again. I got a bachelor's, then I did an ADN, and then I got another bachelor's.
Okay. So you do have your bachelor's now in nursing.
Yeah.
So now you have 2 bachelors.
Correct. Which is, not something that I love or am proud of because that's 2 degrees I had to pay for separately. But yeah, it all led me to this.
Yeah, I have 3 bachelors. It does me no good. Well, the first one was fine. It was in Spanish. And then I thought I want to go to medical school. And so I was like, well, in my first degree, my minor was in biology. I was going to do some prereqs. And I'm like, well, how much more does it take to just get a whole degree? It was only a year of work because those credits transfer. I'm like, fine, let's do it. And then during that time, decided I didn't want to do that. And I wanted to go to nursing school. I found an accelerated second degree program. And then now I have a third. No more bachelors. No more.
It's funny how we just chase education. I really enjoyed school and I chased it. And now I'm doing something that doesn't even need either really degree, which is kind of great. But yeah, that's like where I steer my kids. They're at the age of going to college. And I'm like, you don't necessarily need to be going to college to be successful. It's something that you have to really want.
So I want to get my master's, but I don't need it for anything. Nothing. So I'm like, well, I'm busy. So I think I eventually want to do it just for my own personal goal. But I think that's important even for nurses to know. They automatically think, okay, I need to get a master's. I have to go into this. Well, no, you don't.
Or even bachelor's. You don't even need a bachelor's.
You don't. I know there's been this big push that all nurses should be bachelor's prepared, but I don't know that that's even gone anywhere. I've been hearing that for over 10 years. So do what's easiest for you. If you've got a community college and it's in your town, just get it done. I totally agree with that.
Mine was really cheap. It was like $7,000 when I went. I paid for it as I went. And for flight nursing too, I know we're going to talk about that. It does not require a bachelor's degree. And the only reason why I got it was because when I got into flight nursing, it frees up so much of your time only working 8 shifts a month. That's full time. And so I was like, why not just get my bachelor's? So I did an accelerated bachelor's program all online and did it on my days off. And so that's the only reason why I ended up going that direction and getting it. Otherwise, for flight, I don't know about other entities in nursing. For flight nursing, you do not need a bachelor's degree.
Well, that's such a great segue. So let's jump into it. So you get to nursing school, you graduate. What was your first specialty, your first job?
I knew I always wanted to do flight nursing when I was in nursing school. So I knew I wanted to go into critical care. So because of that, I set myself up while I was in nursing school. And this is what I teach in my program too. As a nursing student, you want to set yourself up as a student intern. If you want a specialty department, that's the safest and easiest way to get an offer prior to graduation. And that's really where you want to focus is getting an offer prior to graduation. Because after you graduate, you want to focus on your boards.
Oh, but wait, so you can know that you want to go into flight nursing and apply for jobs before you even graduate nursing?
You want to apply for critical care before graduating. So I got a student intern position in a medical surgical ICU. And I did that for the 2 years that I was doing my ADN. And then I was offered that position like 6 months prior to graduating. So I did a medical surgical ICU. And that's what I did right after nursing school.
Okay, but you already knew you wanted to do flight nursing. So was it really kind of like, all right, I'm going to do my 2 years or whatever the minimum is required and then move on?
Yeah. So the minimum requirement in the United States is 3 years. And I did it for about 4. And it was just myself that kept me from going to the next thing. So I knew I was ready. I hit that 3-year requirement. I was like, oh, I need more. It's a common thought that I hear a lot of my clients say is I need more time and experience. I got to build up my resume. So all of those thoughts. Well, life circumstances hit me. I had a brother who passed away very suddenly. And I was like, this is it. Like life is too short. I got to go for it. This is what I got into nursing for. Let's just go for it. So at that point, I didn't know anybody in the industry. I just researched it, wasn't able to talk to anybody, and then had my first flight interview and got hired in my first interview.
So when you say research, so if there's nurses out there listening, they're like, okay, check, I need at least 3 years of critical care experience. And then I know I want to get into flight nursing. What did they look up? Like, where did they start?
So what I want them to know is that researching can work against you. If you research and you ask people, you will get all different opinions. I'm going to tell you right now, the only requirement in the United States, I'm only speaking for United States, for flight is 3 years ER or ICU. That's it. They're actually moving away from requiring any kind of certification like your CEN or CCRN because the requirement now is to get your CFRN within 1 to 2 years of being hired with flight companies. So the only requirement is 3 years ER or ICU. Now, people muddle that and people go and get 3 years ER and then 3 years ICU and then 3 years pediatric and then they get their EMT. And that's what takes people longer. So actually, this is what's going to hurt you is doing the research. It's just 3 years ER or ICU. And I'm actually helping people get hired in my program before that mark by following the steps that I really teach. I just had someone about a week ago get hired with less than 1 year ER experience. And so it's not about experience that they really want to be focusing on to get to flight.
Wow. So is it really competitive, these flight nursing jobs?
I'm going to tell you it's competitive in the fact that a lot of people want to do flight nursing, but not a lot of people will actually go for it. And so what happens is people have in their mind that this competitiveness is built up by having a really stacked resume. And it's only competitive because what they're looking for in the candidates is who you are, what you value, and the team player you are. And what makes it so competitive is that lots of people want it. And so there's lots of applications and lots of people that they're sifting through. And I really teach you in my program how to be that person that they pick and how to be that person that they bring to the interview. So it's competitive in the fact that there's lots of people who want it. So there's lots of applications out there, which makes it very different, which makes it like you don't want to look for openings to try to get a position like you do for most nursing jobs. If you're looking for an opening, those openings are already spoken for by people who have been doing the steps ahead of time. And so I really teach you how to be doing those steps ahead of time to be invited to the interview before there's a posting online. So it's competitive in that there's a lot of people who want it, but they're going about looking for it the wrong way.
Okay. So back up. You did eventually get into flight nursing. I didn't ask you, how long were you a flight nurse?
Yeah, so I was a flight nurse for about 6.5, 7 years. And then I retired about 2 years ago and went all in flight nurse coaching and helping people get into flight that way.
Okay. Do you miss it?
I do miss it. It wasn't I wasn't ready to leave it, but because my business grew so fast and it happened so quickly, I was faced with a choice. It was either continue to do that or continue to help more people in this capacity. And I knew I was going to have to choose one or the other. And I went from full-time to part-time to per diem. and then decided fully to leave it. And it did take a full year for me to really grieve missing it.
Yeah. Okay. So for someone like me, I don't know anything about flight nursing. Like, are there different kinds? What's even out there?
Yeah. So as a flight nurse, there are different types of companies and bases that you can work for, but we're all doing the same job. So it's basically critical care, but in an airframe. So the difference that makes it from CCT, ground transport nursing, to flight nursing is that you're doing it in a moving aircraft. Can look like different things, like a helicopter or an airplane. But the difference is you have either companies that are their own entity, private air ambulance companies, or you have companies that have their own airframe at the hospital, so a hospital-based entity. So there's kind of the two different one. There also are like military flight nursing, which is different than civilian flight nursing, but they're all pretty much doing the same job. Depending on the company and the base, you're gonna have scene calls. So those are 911 calls that you're dispatched to, medevac calls, and then you're gonna have calls that do inter-facility. So from taking a patient from one hospital to another hospital. So those are the two types of calls that you do no matter what kind of airframe you're in.
Okay. And different companies do different ones.
Yeah, it's really not even just different companies, but different bases and depending on your area. So I live in a very like rural based area, agricultural based area. So because of that, there are a lot of 911 calls. We get a lot of ag calls, tractor accidents, or by water. So we get a lot of water accident calls. There's a lot of like gangs. So we get a lot of stabbings and gunshot wounds. And then we have a big like ski resort too. So we'll get a lot of ski resort accidents and a lot of traffic accidents. So the company I worked for did a lot of 911 calls, but it just really ends up like being where's the location of the base that you're working at? What types of calls you're seeing? Are you also in a very rural area where maybe you're not next to a level one? So you're taking from a bunch of rural bed ERs and ICUs and taking them to a different hospital where they can get a higher level of care. So it also is different within a company what predominant calls those bases run.
Okay. So is it just you and a pilot? Is it two pilots? Is it you and another nurse? Is a doctor on board? Do you have standing orders? What does it look like?
So teams can look different across the US, but for the majority of them, you're running a team of 3. You have a pilot who has no medical experience. This is one common question I get. Are you a pilot? Do you know how to fly the aircraft? Does the pilot do the medical part? So it's very separate. FAA requirements for an EMS pilot are separate than the medical requirements. But all over the US, a common team looks like a pilot, flight medic, and a flight nurse. And that's a common team, but I have seen teams where there's like a physician and a flight nurse, or a physician and a flight medic, or 2 flight nurses and a pilot. But the most common team is a pilot, flight nurse, and a flight medic.
Okay. And then we talked a little bit about, before we even started recording, what is like a typical, okay, I'm going to work for this base. I'm going to work for this company. What does my typical work week look like in terms of what's required?
Yeah. So again, that's different across bases and companies. So if you work for a hospital based company, some of them are 8 hours, some of them are 12 hours, some are 24. You can even work for a private air ambulance that's like a national air ambulance company that's not attached to a hospital. Those can be anywhere from 12, 24, 48. I have people who work traveling positions, so they do 14 days on and 14 days off. Really just depends across the board from a company, but usually it's either 12 hours or 24. A lot of flight nurses will work 24-hour shifts, and that schedule looks different depending also on the company that you work for. So my schedule, the company I worked for, was 8 24-hour shifts. We worked one 24-hour on, had one 24-hour off, and then worked our second on, and then had 5 days off in a row. So that allowed for a ton of flexibility for my family life. I had 4 small children at home, so it was like the perfect work-life balance for me. But that can look different depending on what company you work for. And I always tell people, I teach them this concept of doing ride-alongs and making connections with flight companies. That's how you ultimately get invited to an interview. And I teach them, you want to be doing 6 to 8 of these a year, and those are the questions that you want to ask. What's the schedule? What's the pay? What's your scheduling look like? Just all of those questions. That's what you find out as you're doing these ride-alongs with them.
Well, actually, that's another segue into another question. You said, okay, they might have postings where you can apply for the job. Okay, great. That's not enough just to throw in your hat. You should have been doing pre-work. Like, calling the company, asking to do a ride along. Is it just as easy as that? Can you call, go in and say, hey, this is me. I want to do a ride along?
Yes, it is just as easy as that. The key to the pre-work is mapping out your plan earlier on. So I've been running my program now for the last 3 years, and the people who join as soon as nursing school and map their plan early on and get on track, I'm finding now they're getting hired before their 3-year mark, and they're getting hired in the first 1 to 2 flight interviews. And this is just simply because they're not doing more. They're focusing in on the 3 things that I teach, which is map out your plan, know exactly what year 1, 2, and 3 look like. And then doing these ride-alongs and making connections with flight companies is big. And then the third piece is prep confidently for flight interviews, because flight interviews are just like no other interview you've ever been in. And then the difference that I teach too with the coaching piece is that mindset is everything. So I really help you grow your belief and your confidence levels in yourself.
Yes. I'm so glad that you said that, because I feel like a lot of people, they're miserable. They want to make a change, but there's work to be done if you want to make a change. And I love that you give people a roadmap. If you want this change, this is what you have to do. It's not just going to fall in your lap. It's not just going to be, I'm going to apply to one and it's all going to work out. I mean, it might. It's kind of like going viral on social media. You might, but you sure shouldn't be banking on that, because there's no guarantees and you just never know. But I like the idea of, I'm going to do the most that I can do instead of just kind of chalking it up, throwing it into the wind. So I'm so glad to hear you say that. And the mindset.
The mindset is the key to it all. So many people have big dreams and have big goals like flight, but lots of people can't get there because they can't wrap their mind around, I don't know enough. I don't have enough time and experience. I'm not good enough. And those are the key things that I really teach in my program. And that's why I think the coaching piece is so important. So I'm going to give you the mindset piece coupled with the strategy. And that's really what's helped create success for a lot of the people that are in my program, is that part of it right there.
Maybe this would make people feel better. Let's say you get hired, or they're afraid, they don't want to apply because they feel like they don't know enough.
Yeah.
Let's say you apply, you get it. What does your orientation look like?
Yeah. That's going to be different again from company to company. And the reason why the mindset piece is so important is because when most people come to work with me, all they're concerned about is getting hired. And then once they get hired, that's when the real work begins. Once you get hired, everything that you felt was weak before is 10x to now. And so what I really teach ahead of time with my coaching is, let's not only get you hired, but let's create success now for you in your thinking, so that after you get hired, you're navigating orientation, the imposter syndrome better, and you know exactly what to expect mindset wise. And so I'm really teaching that, not only like it's important to me that you get hired, but how are you going to create success for yourself afterwards? Because I watched so many people precepting people for almost the 6 years that I flew, spend all their time and energy, get hired, then they get hired and then they burn out because they kept trying to do more. And you have to actually take time to slow down.
Yeah.
So orientation will look different for everybody. It really is dependent on your company, and then it's dependent on how well you're doing. They read you and see, like, when can you like be on your own? And so that's really determined by overcoming some of those weaknesses and learning how to drink through a fire hose, which I really prepare you ahead of time for that.
Right. It almost sounds like entrepreneurship. You work so hard, you have all this imposter syndrome, but you're like, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. And then you do it, and then you work on getting the work, and then you have to do the work. And then it's not just, okay, I've arrived, I'm getting work. It's like, oh, this is just the beginning of getting the work.
Yeah. And my take on imposter syndrome and what I teach my students and my clients is that imposter syndrome for people like me and you are just always going to be there. It's like learning to have a great relationship with it, because what's required of us to be big and play big is to always have the imposter syndrome. So instead of trying to get it to go away, let's just form a good relationship with it. Let's just know it's always going to be there. And I know when I feel it the most, like that's my next growth level. That's when I'm getting ready to grow. That's when I'm stepping into the next version of myself. And that's really what I teach my clients, is it's not a problem to have it. It's actually like something that we need to just learn to bring with us and have a good relationship with.
And you have to wonder about people who have no hesitations. You're like, oh, I think I know everything. And you're like, well, I don't know. Maybe you should reevaluate. But what I'm saying, this imposter syndrome, it's like people are like, oh, you're fearless. No, I have plenty of fears. I just do it anyway. So it's like what you're saying is building a good relationship. And it's almost zooming out on your emotions, saying, okay, this is an emotion I'm feeling. It doesn't mean it's who I am. And this is how I'm going to operate around it, through it, with it, and still move forward.
It's the emotion piece, recognizing it, but knowing that your brain is going to offer you that you can have doubt or be confident. And what I really teach is that you can actually do both at the same time. You can have doubts and still show up confidently. You just haven't tapped into that yet. And so that's like the concept that I really teach is we can hold space for lots of opposing emotions at the same time and still do really well and still be really successful. And I think really what's helped me bridge like being a flight nurse to being an entrepreneur is I did that as a flight nurse. Now I'm learning to do that as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, then here's a good question. So you were doing what you always wanted to do. You wanted to do flight nursing. And then at some point, you got this idea to become a coach and to teach others how to do it. How did that happen?
Yeah, so it was a subtle idea. I don't even know if it was an idea versus like it kind of led in that way. But in flight nursing, you experience, even in critical care, you experience a lot of death. And I was probably in flight nursing maybe 2 or 3 years. And I experienced like 5 deaths, 3 being pediatric in the course of like 3 weeks. And I just remember myself like pulling myself back and not isolating myself is a better word from like my life outside of work. I was willing and able to go to work, but then when I came home, it was like isolation. Like I couldn't relate to my kids or I didn't want to like have connections and relationships with people. And I thought, let's try out this coaching thing. I've done therapy before. Therapy really focuses on who you are in the past and why you are the way you are now. But coaching has really drawn to like thinking about where am I now and where do I want to go? And so I hired my own coach, my first coach, and it was life-changing for me. It's like where I realized like I have control over my feelings and where I'm going. And I get to create every result that I want to create, good or bad or big things. And after I did that, I decided, let's go to this coaching certification that my coach went to. So I enrolled in a certification. I did it over 3 months. And like I said, I had a ton of time still at work because I only worked 8 shifts. And so I worked my schedule around going to this school and doing a certification. And then I'm like, I want to coach healthcare workers. Like, I feel like we can't tap into the way that we feel because we're so much giving to other people and we forget about ourselves. So I'm like, I want to specifically help healthcare workers. And then as I started working on that with healthcare workers, people started asking me about flight. How did you get into flight? And I said, actually, I have this roadmap. I have this roadmap of what's going to create success, get you there in a simple, doable time where you're not overworking, you're not hustling, and you're out of confusion. And I started teaching it and it started getting people hired. And then I started meeting more people who wanted it and more people were getting hired. And it took off. And after it took off, then I went into part-time, then I went into per diem, and then I had to make a choice. Like my business is growing so big. Do I want to help more people or do I want to stay in flight? And for me, the decision was like, you tangibly as a flight nurse get to save lives. Like every shift you get to hands-on be a part of saving someone's life. But I knew as a flight nurse coach, I was going to save even more lives. The more people that I could get into it was the more people I could directly help save. And so that was my decision for me to go all in. And I left flight nursing and retired from nursing totally 2 years ago and went all in.
Yeah. I love the evolution because people think, oh, I need to have the perfect idea before I even start something. And I think that's just poor guidance to yourself.
Yeah.
I say, if you have an idea, explore it. And yours was, hey, I want to do some life coaching for myself. And like, oh, I really like this. And you get into it. And then people start asking you. And it's sort of this evolution of an idea until all of a sudden you're like, okay, we've arrived here at what I really want.
Yeah. I think that thought's only created by we think that what's possible for us is just evidence of what we've done in the past. So people try to create, hey, what I can do in the future is what I've done in the past. And if we do that, then we're just always limiting ourselves. And so I really teach the concept that what you're doing now is created from the future you. So whatever you want to create, you have to go to that person. You have to be that person. You have to be that flight nurse right now. How does she think? How does she make decisions? What is she doing? What is she not doing? And then every decision now in the present you make from her. And that's really what I did in that moment. I thought, if I'm the flight nurse that's helping thousands of people, what would I be doing? And I wouldn't be flying anymore. That the concept of we can't create what we want in life by looking at past evidence. We have to always shoot to the future to figure out what we can create right now. And I think that's how we create big things.
And how satisfying is it for you? Because I'm sure you get nurses, oh, I know you do. You get nurses who are like, okay, I want to do this. And I love a good course. So I'm going to take a course. I'm going to take a class. I'm going to take a conference. I'm going to take a knee. I'm going to take a seat. I'm going to listen in. And what I'm trying to say is that when you get these nurses that are like, well, I don't know, I don't know. And then as they go through your program, you get to see the change in them.
Yeah. I have to reprogram them though. The reprogramming is actually to get to flight, you have to do less.
That's so weird to me. You mean like less certifications?
Yeah. You have to do less. And I really believe that's actually how you get to your impossible goals is by slowing down and doing less. You have to evaluate like what are the things that you can take out and what are the things that you really just want to be focusing on. And so that's how I teach getting to flight is in 5 simple steps. Like just focus in on those 5 simple steps, slow down, work on your capability and growing your capability and your capacity. And that's how you're going to actually get there.
And that's so the opposite of what nurses are taught, because nurses are taught more certifications, more classes, more degrees, go back to school, which you may want to do all those things. There's nothing wrong with doing those things. But you're saying for the flight nursing, actually, if this is what you want to do, all of these things that you're looking to add on isn't going to do it for you. It's these, and we're going to simplify.
Well, I want to back up and say those things will work for you. I see people do that all the time. You can do all of those things, but it will take you longer and it will have you burn out. So after precepting people for 6 years, I saw those same nurses come in who did all the things. Then they got into flight and then they tried to do all the things in flight. And flight nurse, you got to slow down to take in all the new things. And they burnt out and they only lasted 1 to 2 years because of it. And another concept I teach is like how you are trying to get there will be how you are when you get there. So if you're trying to hustle and overwork to get to flight, you're going to hustle and overwork once you get there. And so that's the concept that I teach is, yeah, you can keep doing that. That's worked for you. But I also have another way of getting there that's going to have you slow down, just do a couple things. That way, when you get there, you're not burnt out. You get there, you can receive all the new things.
Wow. What a concept. What do people say when you tell them that?
They don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. But show me how, because I'm willing to try it. I just had someone that I just interviewed on my podcast, and she joined just a couple months ago, and she got hired in her first flight interview. And I didn't believe you when you said that I don't need more time and experience. And she said, but I do now, because we just worked on reprogramming, slow her down, focusing on the thing. She had her first interview and they hired her. And so it really is like, it's okay. I want to debunk people's belief because slowing down is actually going to be the thing that's going to help them with everything else, not just getting into flight.
So tell us about what you have, because you mentioned a podcast. I didn't even know you had a podcast. I knew you had the flight coaching business. So what is your business called?
So my business on Instagram is Janessa Dean Coaching. I have a lifetime membership program. It's called the Flight Prep Academy. So you pay to be into the program, you get courses and you get weekly coaching calls with me that are recorded. And then you also get a community group chat, which I think is like the biggest thing. Community is huge. It's a community I wish I had as I was a nurse working critical care and becoming a flight nurse. So it's a lifetime membership for however long it takes you to get into flight. And then after you get hired into flight, I do have another program that's full of flight nurses and flight paramedics where I'm coaching you in the same type of lifetime membership on a weekly basis with a community as well. So those are the 2 things that I offer. I do offer one-on-one coaching as well.
Okay. And then you said you had a podcast. What's the podcast?
So I do have a podcast. It's called Frontline Static. And on this podcast, I'm giving you mindset pieces like some of the things that we talked about, forward future thinking, creating big things, how to navigate imposter syndrome. And then on the podcast, I also do interview people who have gotten hired who are in the Flight Prep Academy as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your information. I cannot wait for nurses to hear this because I'm sure a lot of nurses hear about, well, I want to hear about flight nursing, and then they don't even know where to begin. So remind us again, where do we find you? Are you most active on Instagram? That's where I found you.
I am. That's my only platform. I've tried to keep my marketing simple, and I actually love Instagram, so that's the only place that I am. Yeah, so Instagram, Janessa Dean Coaching.
Janessa Dean Coach. And then what's your website?
My website is Janessa Dean Coaching too, as well, I think. You can go to my Instagram and you can click on the link and it has my website. I'm not a huge like website person. I do have a website, but most people, if you have any questions for me, just direct message me on Instagram. I answer every direct message back personally. But if you want to know what my website is, you can click on the link and it has my website on there on Instagram.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for sharing. I want to end the podcast with just a couple of like fun questions.
Okay. Perfect.
So if you were not a nurse, what would you do? Like, could not do nursing, no flight nursing, no coaching, no nothing.
What would I do? I don't know. I think this is a great question because I think our identities get very caught up in what we do. And that's been a twist for me going from entrepreneur to nursing. I'm not sure.
I'll tell you mine.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's a little too late now, but I would have been a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader.
Listen, it's never too late to do whatever you want to do.
It's way late. On that one. When I was little, I always wanted to do gymnastics. We couldn't do it. We didn't have a ton of money growing up. And there was a gal that I was friends with. I went to elementary school with her, and she became a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. And if you're from Texas, every little girl at least once dressed up for Halloween as a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. And I don't think I would have made it. I am the most inflexible person, but I would work on it. If God said, Erica, you can't go to the Marines, you can't be a nurse, you couldn't be an entrepreneur, what would you do? I think I'd be a dancer.
I love it. I love it. And I think the reason why I can't come to my head is that I just have loved wearing lots of different hats. Like I love being a mom. I love being a nurse. I loved what I did before. And I think if I didn't, I just changed. And that's why this is now my third career. So I don't know. I have to think about that.
Yeah. It used to be back in the day, you started working at what, 21, 20, and then that was your job. And you stayed there. It doesn't matter if you hated it, you were going to stay. And now I'm like, I think I'll try this. I think I'll try that.
Totally. It's so fun. And I have an adult child now. He's 19. And then my twins are almost 17. They'll be 18 next year. Then I have another little one. But it's interesting. I feel like our path growing up is like, where are you going to college? Then what are you doing after that? And the questions that I ask them are very different. It's what would fulfill you right now? And whatever it is, I always tell them, like, it's never permanent. Like, you don't like it, change it, do something different. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to necessarily get a certification. Do what you love. And when you don't love it anymore, know that it's okay to change. And I think that's like the different story than when we were growing up.
Well, and also when we were growing up, I feel like that like you had to have your entire life figured out by 25. Like you had to be graduated from school, be on some sort of trajectory that others felt was important and making a certain amount of money, which, I mean, we need money to live. So I've got no problem with having money, but it's not that linear and it's okay.
Exactly. Most people don't create success for themselves until later on in life, 40s, 50s, because that's when they really figure out who they are. And like when my kids ask me that, I'm like, I'm still trying to figure it out. I love this right now and what I'm doing. And so I'm going to keep doing it. But that might change for me later. And that's okay too. It's like just not being afraid of that change.
Well, and I think personally, as I've gotten older, you get this one life, just one. And why not pursue it? Try it. And, I'm not saying be reckless, but take risks. There's a difference between risk and being reckless. So one last question, because I know you've got to go. What are some hobbies? What is a flight nurse hobby?
Flight nurse hobby. Okay, I hate running, but because I hate running, I challenge myself to run. So I ran my first half marathon last year. So I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with running, but I do like it now. It helps me expend some energy. I like spending time with my kids. We like to hike. We like to do outside activities together. I don't love camping as much, but we did do that as a family. So, yeah, and honestly, my hobby is working too. I love being able to help people, and coaching has been something where I've just been able to integrate like my creativity and helping people at the same time. And I think like naturally that's what I love about being a nurse too. So, my hobby is my work too.
Hey, that's great. There's no wrong answers. It's your life, you know? Janessa, thank you so much for coming on. I'll tag your website, but I'll tag your IG because that's where you're living. Yeah, but thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
That's a wrap for this episode. If you're enjoying the show, I'd so appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star rating and a written review. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more nurses looking to explore, inspire, and celebrate this incredible profession. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you back here soon.